The glass doors of Falcon Tower slid shut behind her, trapping the last echoes of her supervisor's voice inside. Outside, the air was bright and merciless, the kind of golden afternoon that made the city look almost kind. But Nora couldn't feel any of it. Her cheeks still burned from the humiliation. She walked across the marble plaza, her reflection flashing in the windows like fragments of someone else's life. Someone who belonged here. She didn't. Not really. Not when the people inside treated her like furniture with legs. That slap, more verbal than physical, but it stung all the same, replayed in her mind on a cruel loop. You're lucky we even keep you here, Nora. You think this is charity work. It wasn't the first time she'd been spoken to like that. Probably wouldn't be the last. But this time something inside her snapped. She clenched her jaw, fingernails biting into her palms. Her faded work uniform made her almost invisible in this sea of silk and steel. People like me clean up their mess and vanish, she muttered under her breath. And they don't even see it. She would have kept walking, head down, heart full of fury, if not for the small scene unfolding by the main entrance. A man stood there, maybe 30-32, the kind of person who looked as if he'd been assembled by expensive hands. Immaculate navy coat, shoes so polished they could cut light, hair combed with precision that screamed control. He glanced at his watch every few seconds, tapping one glossy shoe against the ground, irritation coiling around him like invisible smoke. And from the pocket of his coat peeked a leather wallet, thick, dark, and careless. Nora's eyes didn't linger long. Normally, she would have walked right past him. The rich were everywhere here, blending together like perfume and arrogance. But just beyond him, half hidden behind an advertisement screen, sat someone else. A man older than the concrete beneath him, hunched under a torn jacket. His face was gray with hunger, hands trembling as he held them out to the indifferent river of suits passing by. His voice, when it came, was barely more than breath. Please, anything. For a heartbeat, the two figures, the man of wealth and the man of dust, framed each other perfectly in Nora's mind. The injustice of it made her blood fizz. She felt a familiar shift inside her, a dangerous one. The instinct that had kept her alive when she had nothing. Her body moved before her conscience caught up. A few brisk steps. A collision that looked accidental. A brief, practiced motion of her fingers, quick as thought. And the wallet was in her hand. She could feel her pulse in her throat. The next motion came just as smoothly. She stooped, feigning embarrassment, and held it up. I think you dropped this, she said, her voice steady, even kind. The man blinked, momentarily confused, then checked his pocket. When he realized it was empty, his face softened into a rehearsed smile, the kind that never reached the eyes. Ah, yes, my wallet. Thank you. He flipped it open, thumbed through a fan of crisp bills, and with a faintly bored sigh, drew one out. Here, he said, offering her a note. For your honesty. The tone was sharp like a door closing. Not gratitude, dismissal. Nora took the bill without a word. The man turned away, already back to his watch, his time, his world. She looked down at the paper in her hand, more money than she made in a week, and felt her anger drain into something quieter, heavier. Then she turned, crossed the plaza, and knelt by the old man. His eyes lifted, wary, as she pressed the folded bill into his shaking palm. Get yourself a meal, yeah? She whispered. For a moment the man just stared, as if afraid the world might snatch it back. Then his lips moved. Not words, just a sound, raw and grateful. Nora smiled, a small fleeting thing. Justice, she thought. Maybe a crooked kind, but justice. She stood, ready to leave the plaza behind, ready to breathe again. But before she could take 3 steps, 2 men in dark suits stepped out of nowhere and blocked her path. Miss, said one of them, polite but firm, you'll need to come with us. Security would like a word. And just like that, the sunlight vanished behind her, replaced by the cold hum of surveillance screens and suspicion. The security office was colder than any room had a right to be. The air smelled of recycled dust and bad coffee. And the walls were lined with monitors showing every corner of Falcon Tower. On one of them, Nora saw herself, frozen mid-step, her hand halfway into the pocket of the rich man's coat. Her stomach dropped. The head of security, a round man with a neck that seemed to vanish into his collar, leaned back in his chair. His badge read Mason, though the smug grin on his face made it look like it should have said predator. "You think we're idiots?" he said, waving one pudgy hand at the screen. "Caught red-handed, sweetheart. That's theft, plain and simple." Nora didn't answer. Words had never helped her much in rooms like this. Mason tapped the monitor again, the scene replaying in grainy black and white. "You slipped your hand into his pocket, took his wallet, then handed it back. Pretty performance. You rehearsed that, huh?" Nora clenched her fists under the table. "I gave it back," she muttered. "Oh sure. Out of the goodness of your heart, right?" He chuckled, like someone who found cruelty entertaining. "Guess what? That's still attempted theft. I could call the police right now." The word police hit like a punch. For someone with her past, it meant more than jail. It meant no job, no chance, no future. Then the door opened. The rich man, Adrian, though she didn't know his name yet, stepped inside. His coat still perfect, his face carved in irritation. "Mr. Hale," Mason said instantly, straightening up. "Sorry to trouble you, sir. We detained this woman after she..." Adrian raised a hand. "Enough. I know why I'm here." His voice was cool, smooth like polished metal. He looked from Mason to Nora, then back. "She didn't steal anything. I dropped my wallet. She picked it up and returned it. That's all." Mason blinked, clearly thrown off script. "Sir, with respect, the footage shows exactly that," Adrian interrupted. "An honest woman handing back what wasn't hers. Do you make a habit of harassing good citizens? Or is today special?" The guard stammered, red spreading across his cheeks. We just thought." "Don't," Adrian said sharply. "Thinking doesn't seem to be your strength." He turned to Nora. "Come with me." Before she could reply, he took her gently, but firmly, by the elbow and led her out. The security guards watched in stunned silence as the doors slid shut behind them. Outside, in the quiet of the marble hallway, Nora exhaled shakily. "You didn't have to do that," she said, still not meeting his eyes. "Didn't I?" Adrian replied, walking toward the elevators. "You looked like you were about to crumble in there." She stopped walking. "Why did you help me?" He turned then, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't arrogance. Curiosity, maybe even amusement. "Because you're interesting," he said simply. "And because I don't believe in wasting talent." "Talent?" she echoed, almost laughing. "You think lifting wallets is a talent?" He gave a half smile. "It's a start. Come on." He pressed the elevator button, and the polished steel doors reflected them both. The man of wealth and the cleaner in her faded uniform, standing side by side like the universe had played a trick on symmetry. When the doors opened, he gestured for her to enter. "Let's talk somewhere less fluorescent." She hesitated. Every instinct screamed don't. But another part, the one that had carried her through orphanages and shelters, whispered that this was how survival worked. Sometimes you followed the wolf into the woods if it meant finding a way out. She stepped inside. As the elevator slid downward toward the underground parking garage, Adrian finally spoke again, voice quiet but commanding. "I'm going to make you an offer, Nora. And I suggest you listen carefully." The elevator descended in silence, broken only by the hum of steel and electricity. Nora stood tense beside Adrian Hale, the stranger who just saved her from being branded a thief. Her reflection in the mirrored walls looked like someone else entirely. Smaller, sharper, a little dangerous. When the doors opened to the underground garage, the air was cooler, echoing faintly with the sound of engines above. Adrian walked ahead without a word, his shoes clicking in measured rhythm. A matte black car waited near the exit, low, sleek, predatory. He opened the passenger door. "Get in." Nora hesitated. "You expect me to just..." "If I wanted you arrested," he interrupted, "I would have left you upstairs." That shut her up. She slid into the seat, the leather soft and cold beneath her hands. The door closed with a satisfying thud, sealing her inside a world that smelled faintly of tobacco and new money. Adrian started the engine, pulling out into the street. City lights slid over his face, sharp cheekbones, eyes like tempered glass. For several blocks, neither of them spoke. Then, without looking at her, he said, "You've done that before." Nora turned her head. "Done what?" "The hand trick. The lift. You were too smooth for it to be an accident." She stared out the window. I grew up where accidents like that meant dinner. He smiled faintly. Resourceful. I like that. You don't know me. Not yet, he said. But I've learned to recognize desperation. It's efficient. It cuts through hesitation. She frowned. What do you want from me? At a red light, he finally looked at her. His eyes were calm, too calm. A partnership. Nora laughed, a short, bitter sound. You're joking. No. I'm offering you work. Dangerous but lucrative. She studied him warily. You're serious. He nodded once, then turned down a quiet street lined with glass and shadows. The car came to a smooth stop beside the river, city lights rippling across the water. You ever heard of Victor Langford? He asked. Nora frowned. The tech billionaire? The one with those self-healing materials? The posters are everywhere. That's the one. Adrian's voice hardened. Everything he owns, every patent, every fortune, every luxury was built on a lie. On something he stole. He reached into the console and pulled out a small black folder. Inside, a photo of a younger man, himself, stood beside two older figures, their smiles proud, their eyes kind. My parents, he said quietly. They created the formula Langford's empire is built on. He took it. The fire that killed them erased the only proof. Nora said nothing. I spent years trying to find the evidence he buried. And now I know where it is. Locked inside his private office during the gala next week. He looked at her directly now. That's where you come in. Nora blinked. You want me to rob him? Retrieve what belongs to my family, he corrected softly. You'll go unnoticed. You're invisible to people like him. You blend. That's your gift. She shook her head. I'm a janitor, not a spy. You're more than that, Nora. You just don't know it yet. Silence stretched between them. The hum of the car filled it. Steady, patient, waiting. Finally she asked, why me? You could hire anyone. Adrian leaned back in his seat, eyes on the skyline. Because I saw the way you looked at that old man today. You could have kept the money. But you didn't. You're not greedy. You're angry, and anger when aimed right is powerful. Nora stared at the water, her reflection fractured by the current. And if I say no? He shrugged. Then I'll drive you home, and we'll forget this ever happened. She looked at him, then really looked, the polished confidence, the quiet intensity, the grief sitting just behind his composure. She didn't trust him, not entirely. But part of her wanted to. And if I say yes? She asked. A small smile curved his lips. Then tomorrow you stop being invisible. He reached across the console and handed her a silver business card. No logo, no number, just a date and a time embossed in black. Come dressed for the world that never noticed you, he said. I'll take care of the rest. She turned the card in her hand, the weight of it heavier than it looked. Outside, the river shimmered with city light. And in that shifting golden glass, Nora saw her own reflection change, just slightly. Not a cleaner. Not a thief. Something in between. The address on the silver card led Nora to a street she had never walked before. One where the air itself seemed expensive. The buildings weren't tall like Falcon Tower, but quiet, old, confident. The kind of confidence that didn't need to prove itself. A black door stood between two marble columns. No sign, no name, just a discreet brass plate with a single letter. H. She hesitated. Her shoes were scuffed, her jacket frayed at the cuffs. For a second she thought about turning back. But then the door opened on its own, as if the building had been waiting for her. Inside, a woman in a tailored black suit smiled with professional warmth. Miss Vale. Mr. Hale is expecting you. The way she said his name made it sound less like a person and more like a brand. The assistant led her through a quiet corridor lined with soft lighting and abstract art. The air smelled faintly of cedar and ink. They entered a wide studio where sunlight poured through tall windows. Tables held fabric swatches, jewelry cases, and polished mirrors. Adrian was there, leaning against a counter, phone in hand. When he looked up, he smiled. Not the condescending kind she'd seen yesterday, but something closer to approval. You came. Still deciding whether that was smart, she said. It was. He motioned to the woman. This is Alara. She's a stylist, not a magician, though you may think otherwise in a few hours. Alara's eyes sparkled. We'll see what we can do. Before Nora could protest, the transformation began. It started with the hair. Gone was the dull brown, replaced by a soft, deep shade that framed her face in new symmetry. Her nails were trimmed, her skin soothed with something that smelled of jasmine and quiet power. Then came the clothes, a fitted black dress with subtle structure, the kind that moved like it was made for the person wearing it. By the time they reached the jewelry table, Nora barely recognized the woman in the mirror. She stood straighter. The eyes were still hers, but there was focus now, a glint that hadn't been there before. "You're staring," Adrian said. "I don't look like me." "Good. That's the point." He stepped closer, adjusting a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was careful, professional almost, but the space between them charged instantly. "The gala is in 2 nights," he said. "You'll be my guest. No one will question it. Langford Security is obsessed with tech and reputation, not people. That's our advantage." Nora crossed her arms. "And what exactly am I supposed to do there?" "Smile and blend. Blending is step 1. Step 2 happens upstairs." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flat device, black, no bigger than a key card. "This opens Langford's private archive. Inside there's a safe. A silver folder marked Project Phoenix. That's what we need. Bring it to me, and you walk away with more money than you'll make in 10 years of cleaning offices." "And if I get caught?" "You won't." "You sound sure." "I am." He gave a small knowing smile. "You're better than you think." As the day went on, Adrian briefed her on every detail. The layout of the building, the staff hierarchy, the timing of Langford's movements. Every word he spoke painted the operation less like a crime and more like reclamation. But what lingered wasn't just the plan, it was the way he spoke of his parents. The flicker in his eyes when he said they deserved better. Somewhere between strategy and silence, Nora began to believe him. When dusk fell, she stood by the window of his penthouse, looking out at the city lights below. Adrian approached quietly, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "To new beginnings," he said. She looked at him, unsure whether he was toasting victory or temptation. "To whatever this is," she replied. They touched glasses. The sound was small but sharp, like the start of something neither could yet name. And as the city shimmered beneath them, Nora realized she'd already stepped past the point of return. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of electricity that hums in the air before a storm. Falcon Tower had been transformed. Chandeliers glowed like captured constellations. Music drifted through the marble atrium, a lazy waltz that sounded both ancient and new. Guests sparkled in black and gold, sipping champagne that cost more than Nora's month's rent. She stepped out of the car beside Adrian Hale, and for a heartbeat the world stopped. Every head turned. Gone was the janitor in the gray uniform. In her place stood a woman who belonged here, or at least looked like she did. Her dress was a sculpted whisper of black silk, her hair pinned with precision. But beneath the surface glamour, her pulse was a drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. Adrian leaned close as they entered the hall. His voice was calm, measured. "Remember the plan. I'll handle Langford. You move at 9:15. Security rotation gives you exactly 6 minutes. And if something goes wrong, then improvise. You're good at that." He smiled, the kind that could make danger feel like an invitation. Inside, Victor Langford greeted his guests from a dais near the staircase, tall, silver-haired, and smiling with the confidence of a man who believed the world owed him everything. Cameras flashed, champagne clinked, and the orchestra swelled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Langford announced, his voice booming across the room. "Tonight we celebrate innovation, progress, and the future we've built together." Adrian's jaw tightened. Nora noticed his hand curl into a fist, barely visible at his side. She reached for his arm, a small gesture, instinctive grounding. He met her eyes, and for a moment, his anger softened into something else. "Time," he whispered. Nora slipped away into the crowd. She moved like smoke, quiet, graceful, invisible. The training Adrian had drilled into her over the last 2 days now pulsed through her like instinct. Every step, every turn was a calculated part of the performance. She ducked through a service corridor, heels clicking on tile. The air changed, colder, quieter, smelling faintly of electronics and ozone. Ahead, a restricted door blinked with a red light. She pulled out the black card Adrian had given her and slid it through the scanner. The light turned green. Easy, she whispered to herself. Inside Langford's office was a shrine to wealth. Glass desk, gold accents. A wall of digital screens displaying data streams and patents. But it was the painting on the far wall that caught her eye. A portrait of Langford shaking hands with two scientists. Her stomach twisted. One of them looked almost like Adrian's father. She forced herself to focus. Behind the painting, just where Adrian had said, was a biometric safe. She knelt, scanning the fingerprint pad with a small black device. The pad blinked twice, then beeped softly. The door clicked open. Inside was a silver folder. Stamped in bold letters. Project Phoenix. Her breath caught. She reached for it and froze. There, on the bottom corner of the first document beneath the type signatures, was a handwritten name. Nora Valli. Her own. The room spun. The air seemed to thicken around her. The sound of the party below muffled and distant. She turned the page. More signatures, more blueprints, and again that same name written in the same careful hand. She didn't remember any of this. And yet it felt familiar. A memory surfaced, smoke, heat, the sound of sirens. A child's hand gripping another's in the dark. A voice shouting her name. Then nothing. The door behind her clicked. She spun around, heart racing, but it wasn't a guard. It was Adrian. You weren't supposed to open it here, he said, stepping inside. You lied to me. Her voice trembled. Why is my name on this? He stopped. For the first time since she'd met him, Adrian Hale looked completely lost. I didn't know, he said quietly. I swear, Nora, I didn't know. You said this was your family's work. It is, he whispered. Or it was supposed to be. My father's notes mentioned a prototype assistant. Someone who helped him design the early models. He said she was brilliant. And that she died in the fire too. He stepped closer. You were that assistant. I was a child. You were his daughter, Adrian said. His voice broke on the last word. You're my sister. The folder slid from her trembling hands, pages scattering across the floor like fallen feathers. The world tilted. Everything, the fire, the lost years, the anger, suddenly had a shape. A cruel, perfect symmetry. Downstairs, the music changed, a faster rhythm, a signal that the presentation was about to begin. Adrian looked at her, eyes burning with resolve. We end it tonight, he said. All of it. He reached for her hand, and though every nerve screamed that this was madness, she didn't pull away. Together, they walked toward the elevator, toward the stage, toward the man who had stolen not just their family's work, but their past. And as the doors slid shut, Nora finally understood what Phoenix really meant. It wasn't a project. It was them. The ballroom of Falcon Tower pulsed with light and noise. Music throbbed under chandeliers, laughter rang out like glass breaking, and in the center of it all Victor Langford basked in the glow of his own legend. Cameras lined the back of the room. Every lens was pointed at him. Ladies and gentlemen, Langford boomed, spreading his arms like a conductor before an orchestra. It is with great pride that I unveil the future of sustainable innovation, the culmination of decades of research and dedication. Project Phoenix. Applause erupted. Champagne sparkled in crystal flutes. And then a single voice cut through the noise. That's a lie. The crowd turned. Adrian Hale stepped into the light, his black suit catching every flash like a blade. Beside him, Nora stood silent, her face pale but resolute. The security guards began to move, but Langford lifted a hand, lips curling in amusement. And who, may I ask, are you? Someone you stole from, Adrian said. His voice was steady, but his hands were tight fists. The work you're calling your own, it belongs to Saviel and Mara Vale. My parents. Nora's parents. A hush fell over the hall. Cameras zoomed in. Guests leaned forward, hungry for drama. Langford laughed. A sharp, brittle sound that echoed like glass cracking. That's quite a story, Mr. Hale. Or should I say whatever your real name is. You're interrupting a corporate event with baseless accusations. You want proof. Adrian snapped, raising a folder high. Here it is. The original blueprints. Patent drafts with your forged signature. And documents you thought you buried along with their bodies. He tossed the folder onto the stage. Papers scattered at Langford's feet. Some fell face up, the seal of Vale Industries gleaming beneath the stage lights. Langford's color drained. His hand went instinctively to his chest. "Where did you get this?" he rasped. "From your office," Nora said quietly. "Right where you left it after the fire you paid for." A wave of whispers swept the audience. Phones lifted, someone was already live streaming. Langford's eyes darted across the room, panic flashing for the first time. "You don't know what you're talking about. These documents are fabricated." "No," Adrian said, stepping closer. "They're evidence. And as of 10 minutes ago, they're in the hands of the police." Right on cue, the glass doors at the back of the hall opened. 2 officers entered, badges glinting under the light. The crowd parted, murmuring. Langford stumbled back, clutching the podium for balance. His breath came fast, ragged. "You can't do this to me," he wheezed. "I built this city." "No," Nora said, her voice sharp as ice. "You built it on ashes." For a heartbeat, the old man seemed to shrink, his power unraveling under the weight of truth. Then his knees buckled, and he fell hard against the stage. Gasps erupted around the room. Adrian caught Nora's arm. The world seemed to slow, the music fading, the flashing lights dimming into silence. They had done it. It was over. Hours later, the ballroom was empty. Police tape glinted across the entrance. Langford was gone, taken to a hospital under guard. Nora stood near the tall windows, staring down at the sleeping city. Her reflection looked foreign. This woman in silk and diamonds, who had walked into fire and somehow walked back out. Adrian joined her, his jacket over one shoulder. He looked exhausted but lighter, as if the air around him finally belonged to him again. "They confirmed it," he said quietly. "The police traced the patents. Vale Industries is ours again." Nora nodded but didn't answer. "You should be happy," he said. "Our parents finally have justice." She turned to him, eyes wet but steady. "Justice doesn't bring them back." He hesitated, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "No. But it gives us a beginning." Outside, the first hint of dawn crept across the skyline, soft, fragile light breaking through the city haze. "So what now?" she asked. Adrian smiled faintly. "Now we rebuild. For them. For us. For the name they tried to erase." He extended his hand, and after a long breath, Nora took it. Behind them, the last of the police lights flickered out. Ahead, the horizon was turning gold. The phoenix had risen, not from fire this time but from truth. Morning broke with an unfamiliar quiet. No sirens, no shouting, no alarms, just the slow hum of a city waking up to headlines that changed everything. Langford Empire collapses after fraud exposure. Vale heirs reclaim family legacy. The news tickers ran it on every channel. Stock prices plunged, press conferences were scheduled, and analysts argued over the same question. Who were the Valles, and how did they come back from the dead? Nora sat in Adrian's penthouse, staring at the television but seeing none of it. Her reflection in the glass was sharp, unrecognizable. The woman who had walked into Falcon Tower last night looked nothing like the one sitting here now. On the coffee table lay the folder that had started it all, Project Phoenix. Its pages were no longer just evidence. They were her parents' voices, resurrected in ink. Adrian entered the room with 2 mugs of coffee. He looked rested for the first time in days, but beneath the calm, his eyes held that same restless fire. "Board meetings at noon," he said. "They'll try to delay, maybe even buy us off, but the shares are legally ours now. The lawyers confirmed it this morning." Nora nodded slowly. "You really think we can run a company?" "We already ran a revolution." That earned him the faintest smile. The elevator ride to Vale Industries headquarters felt unreal. The building had been Langford's flagship once, all chrome, glass, and intimidation. Now it stood hollow, its logo being stripped from the facade while a new one waited to be installed. Inside the boardroom, the air was thick with expensive fear. Men and women in tailored suits whispered to each other as Nora and Adrian entered. "Mr. Hale," one of the executives began cautiously, "we understand the legal transfer, but you must realize, this company operates on delicate networks. Investors need reassurance. You can't just walk in and take over." Adrian smiled. Not with arrogance, but with something steadier. We're not taking over. We're taking back. He placed the folder on the table. The bold title gleamed under the fluorescent lights. This was the heart of Vale Industries, a project meant to revolutionize clean energy, before Langford twisted it into a military contract. We're restoring it to what it was meant to be. The room fell silent. Even the skeptics didn't dare interrupt. Then Nora spoke, softly, but with a conviction that carried. Our parents believed in building something that helped people, not just profited from them. That's the only future we're offering. You can stay or step aside. A few exchanged nervous glances. One older woman, who had been silent until now, finally leaned forward. Your mother was the best engineer I ever knew, she said quietly. If you're anything like her, I'm in. That was all it took. One by one, others nodded. The vote passed unanimously. Later, as the boardroom emptied, Nora stood by the window overlooking the city. The skyline glowed in the afternoon sun, golden and endless. Adrian joined her, his reflection lining up with hers in the glass. They'll come for us again, he said. Langford's allies, the competitors, they won't forget. Then we'll be ready, she said. Phoenixes don't burn twice. He laughed softly. That sounds like something Mom would have said. Yeah, Nora whispered. Maybe she did. They stood there in silence, two survivors stitched together by loss, blood, and rebirth. Outside, the city pulsed with life again, unaware that beneath its surface, history had just looped back into balance. For the first time in years, Nora felt something close to peace. Not because justice had been served, not because power had shifted, but because the ghosts had finally gone quiet. That evening, when the last light faded and the city turned silver again, Nora walked alone to the rooftop terrace. The air was cool, the wind carrying traces of rain and exhaust, the scent of everything real. She closed her eyes, let it wash over her, and whispered, "We made it, Mom. We made it, Dad." Somewhere far below, a generator hummed to life. The first prototype of Project Phoenix reactivated after decades of silence. Its pulse matched hers, and as the skyline lit up one building at a time, the reborn Vale legacy began to glow with it. Not a monument to vengeance, but a promise of renewal. The morning sun spilled across the Vale Industries headquarters, gilding the glass facade like fire frozen in time. For Nora, this wasn't just another workday. It was the first day of a future she had fought, stolen, and earned. Inside, the offices buzzed with energy. Engineers, designers, and analysts moved through spaces that had once been Langford's empire of greed. Now they moved for creation, innovation, and purpose. Nora walked alongside Adrian, her hand brushing the folders they had recovered. Her reflection in the glass showed not just a polished executive, but a survivor, someone who had clawed back her family's name from the ashes. We're not just building a company, Adrian said. We're building a legacy, one that can't be stolen. And one that won't destroy itself, Nora added. They paused in the main lab, where the first prototype of Project Phoenix had been reassembled. Machines hummed softly, lights blinking in a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. It's beautiful, Nora whispered. Adrian smiled. It's not the invention that matters. It's what it stands for: integrity, vision, survival. That's what we take from the past. Weeks passed, and Vale Industries rose like a phoenix from the ashes of Langford's greed. Contracts were signed, new inventions patented, and for the first time, the Valas operated under their own terms. Adrian handled strategy, investment, and public relations, while Nora immersed herself in operations, ensuring the company ran efficiently and ethically. Despite the glittering offices and bustling teams, the siblings never lost the lessons of their past. Every decision was weighed against the lives of those they served, and every project honored the parents they had lost. One evening, as the city's lights flickered like stars mirrored in glass, Nora stood on the rooftop terrace again. Adrian joined her quietly. They watched the skyline, the gentle hum of the city below matching the pulse of the company they had revived. Do you ever think about how far we've come? Adrian asked. Every day, Nora said. And yet it doesn't feel finished. Not yet. Maybe it never will, Adrian said. But that's why it's ours, the unfinished, the growing, the alive. They shared a quiet smile, The kind that only those who've survived fire and loss can understand. Below, Project Phoenix glowed in the lab, a symbol not of greed or theft, but of rebirth. A spark of hope that had endured decades of darkness, now alive in their hands. Together, Adrian asked, extending his hand. Nora took it, her grip firm. Together. And for the first time in her life, she felt whole. The city stretched endlessly before them, a canvas of light and shadow, challenge and promise. And the Valles, siblings reunited, heirs restored, survivors reborn, were ready to write the next chapter. From the ashes of betrayal, fire, and loss, they had risen. The Phoenix had truly taken flight. Let me know how you liked my story. And be sure to subscribe to our channel. A new story will be posted here tomorrow.